All right, it's been a while, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about Loki, the Nexus event, which is episode 4. The name's Dash, and I'm here to talk about it. So let's first start off with the biggest unanswered question we had, and that was who were the timekeepers? One of the prediction was that the timekeepers were none other than Kang the Conqueror, or one of the timekeepers were Kang the Conqueror, or was Kang the Conqueror, because that's what the timekeeper looked like. The timekeeper that was at the center of the three timekeepers. I believe that was the timekeeper people thought was Kang the Conqueror, and so did I. But apparently, at the end of the episode, we see how Sylvie, like, she takes this spear and then like throws it at that lizard at the center, and then the lizard's head gets decapitated, and then we find out that they were nothing else but androids that were being controlled by someone bigger than them or beyond them, whom we don't get to know yet. We might get to know in the future, who knows? And we also see in the beginning how Ravana Renslayer was serving them, and she made it look like they were actually the timekeepers, and we actually believed they were the timekeepers, but actually they weren't. Even Ravana Renslayer made us believe that she knew she knew nothing about the fact that they're not nothing but androids. But towards the end of the episode, we see Sylvie, like, holding this stick that can, like, disappear her or pretty much like melt her, and in front of her, she holds it in front of her, and then Ravana Renslayer, or I'll just say Renslayer, she then decides to tell her everything, which we will see in the next episode. I think there are two more episodes. At least one of them we're going to see the what she tells her, and thus we'll find out the truth about the TVA and who's controlling the TVA and all that. But before that exact scene when Sylvie holds her at, like, pretty much at gunpoint, but with a stick instead, we see Tom Hiddleston's Loki disappear. And for a while we thought, he's gonna die, but how could he die, right? He's the protagonist. But then we see him in a post-credit scene where he gets disappeared to New York City, but not the New York City we see in we saw in the Avengers movie and the Spider-Man movies, but it's pretty much or it's more or less a dystopian New York City, where New York City is completely destroyed, including the Avengers Tower. And instead of the Avengers in New York City, we have Team Loki. So instead of the Avengers team, we have Team Loki that consists of a Thor-like Loki, so a Loki with Thor's hammer, which is Mjolnir, which implies that Loki is worthy of Mjolnir, I guess. And then there's this old Loki, who has this classical Loki costume with his horns and the green costume, which you see in the comic books. And then we also see this kid Loki, who's also the Loki from the comic books. And last but not least, we see an alligator Loki. So it got me thinking, what could be the purpose of the alligator Loki, or how could the alligator Loki be useful? Which we will get to know in the future episodes, which are episode 5 and 6, because there are 6 episodes. And it'll be hilarious, I guess, to see how Tom Hiddleston's Loki interacts with the alligator Loki, and whether the alligator Loki can even talk in the first place or not. But we will find out. It seems exciting. And speaking of Loki disappearing, we also see another character who disappears like that with a stick, and that is Mobius. And Mobius, first of all, let's talk about his character throughout this whole episode. And he starts off with like talking to Renslayer, like after, like, he keeps Loki on. He keeps him in a loophole, which I'm also going to come towards soon. He then goes and meets Renslayer, where he gets to learn about, like, he just out of curiosity, he asks her about, like, his life in the past, like before this, whether he ever had any life. Then Renslayer, she just fakes it, and, like, she just says, like, how she's just trying to protect him. Oh yeah, sorry, almost forgot. He tries to talk to Sylvie, but then, like, Renslayer doesn't allow him. So and then Mobius is like, he's curious to know why. Then she just, like, she lies to him by telling him how she wants to protect him. But in reality, Mobius would probably find out the truth about his life before he worked for the TVA, because Sylvie knows the truth. She knows that everyone had a life before working at the TVA, because in the previous episode we learned that when they were on Lamentis. And then so that's why she doesn't allow him, right? we know that she's hiding something, and even Mobius also knows it. So she grabs her like recorder, like he switches his recorder with hers, and then he sees how one of the agents were like executed because she knew about her past. They had to like keep, in order for the truth to not be revealed, they had to like execute her. And he also sees Renslayer being there during her execution, I guess, or during her confession before being executed. And then when Owen Wilson's character Mobius goes to the loophole where Loki is stuck at, to help him come out, and like help him redeem himself, help give him a chance to like fight against the TVA, because he also knows the truth now. And that's exactly after that, it's exactly once they come back to the TVA from Loki's loophole, we see Renslayer and her guards waiting for them, and then they execute Mobius, for which we're gonna have to take a we're gonna need to have a moment of silence for, given how heartbreaking it was to see Mobius's death, or at that time we thought that it was his death, that was his death. So let's do it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right. So, like I said, at that point of time, we all thought, he was actually dead. But in reality, he wasn't. He probably isn't, because we see how Loki just gets sent to another dimension or another universe. But then he doesn't really die. So similarly, Mobius might also be in the same place where Loki was in the post credit scene, or he could be somewhere else. We don't know yet, but we will find out. But about the loophole, which I was going to talk about, it's interesting to see how like Loki kept like getting kicked in his balls by Sif, but the character of Sif was, even though like she wasn't so significant in the show, like we see like what happened with her once. Like I think Loki probably like kind of mind control her or something, and then like cut off her hair, or he really like took over her body and then cut off her hair. We don't know what happened, but looking at Sif, after like watching Sif, kind of like give a call back to the Thor movies, because that's where she was in. And I have to say that it was a relief, because sometimes like even though like we don't want to see Thor in the Loki show, but at least if we have some kind of evidence that Loki is still connected to Thor in some kind of way, even though it's his own show, that's a sort of a relief, because just seeing Loki completely separate from Thor's world is also a little bit sad. It just makes him look really alone and lonely, which Sif also says that he's always going to be alone, but in reality he may not be so alone, which we will also see in the future. That was interesting, because be Loki being alone, like everyone always think he's alone, but in reality he probably has a right to choose whether he's going to be alone or not, because we also see at the end of the episode where he falls in love with Sylvie. He's about to tell her that he's in love with her, but then he gets vanished. So who knows? In the future, Loki and Sylvie might actually have some kind of relationship, and he might not be so alone after all. But I guess that's just me. But sorry about that. I think that was so random to talk about, something really out of the box to talk about. But let's get back to the topic. And apart from Sif, anything else that if I were to talk about is it is now exciting just to see how Team Loki are gonna like work it out, and what they're going to plan to achieve. And it's also going to be interesting to see whether, first of all, whether Mobius is still alive or not, and if he is alive, where is he? And last but not least, what Renslayer tells to Sylvie, and thus we get to find out that we get to learn the truth about TVA, I guess. So these are the three things I'm looking forward to, I guess. And that's it for this video. Tell me what you thought about this video and the show, if you watched the show. And until next time, see you.